Well, good morning in the West and good afternoon in the East. So glad that you all could join us for our final session of the Grain Marketing for 2025 series. We've really enjoyed the opportunity to get to know you through this process and get to answer your questions through this process. And we hope that these webinars have been really valuable to you. If you have any questions as we continue through today, of course, we will take those. You are not able to unmute yourself at this point, but what you can do is put those questions in the chat and we will try to address those today. And then later, we can also turn off the recording if there's a question that you would like to ask without the recording on. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cory Walters. Cory is going to introduce today and walk us through some seasonality and some ways to think about seasonality within the grain market. So go ahead, Cory.
Awesome, and thank you, Jessica. Get this set up. Do I have it in presentation mode? There we are.
Oh.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. And yes, today we're going to talk about seasonality, and definitely would love to hear questions you have at the end here about what you would like to see in future grain marketing webinars or topics discussed, because what you're getting from us is stuff that we've encountered as important, and would like to build upon that. So let's discuss seasonality. And that's Jessica's question. So, uh-oh. Not going to let me go to the next slide. There we go. All right, we're going to focus today on new crop futures. So we're not taking into account anything on old crop. And typically, the way this runs is every year we're going to hear stuff about how important marketing is, and we'll hear from different points of view. We will hear from marketing service that pre-harvest can help you. Bank loan officers will also tell you it reduces price uncertainty, and ag economists such as Jessica and I will jump in and say it's a fantastic management practice. However, that's not always the case. Producers have felt the roses and smelled the roses and felt the thorns in pre-harvest marketing, and that's going to be a big chunk of what we'll go over today. And that leaves us with uncertainty about what we want to do. In our mental minds, how we process information, we often don't want to be wrong. And I'm reminded by Aurelius's quote here: "If someone can prove me wrong, I shall gladly change. I see the truth, which never harmed anyone. The harm is to persist in one's own self-deception and ignorance." And the point being that we need to think deeper about what we're trying to achieve in pre-harvest grain marketing, whether we want to engage in it, and what tools are around to help us, and what logic is around to also help us. So the primary question today is, can pre-harvest hedging improve long-run financial outcomes? We are going to do this with a forward-looking view into the unknown, and that's going to require us to take ownership in our decisions. And we're going to use some historical data as evidence of seasonality, but that doesn't mean seasonality will persist into the future. But we have a lot of years that suggest that something is there. And we're also going to focus on building an average farm price, and that will be a distribution of pre-harvest hedging price plus your harvest price plus your storage. That will be in your portfolio. So pre-harvest marketing, it's going to require guiding principles. And those principles are going to have to reflect exactly what you face, or very close to it. So today we're going to cover the market, the role of time, and then the seasonality that exists in that historical data. Let's talk about the market. We can break the market into kind of two distinct categories. We're going to break it into extremistan and then mediocristan. In Mediocristan, essentially, if your local liquor shop closes, there'll be a few people that will be out jobs, and possibly a new store opens up around the corner, and those people that lost those jobs probably go around another corner and find some new jobs. And that's always existing around us all the time. There's always turnover in this. But in Extremistan, if a large bank, let's say Lehman Brothers, folds, sends all those jobs, the folks, all those people lose those jobs, but it sends a sweeping signal to the entire financial industry that will reveal any other vulnerable banking institutions, which happened perfectly back in 2008. A little closer to us is the Russian wheat embargo in 1980, when we put a stop to selling any wheat over there, and that caused our domestic prices to crash. And another one, which we're all very familiar with, is COVID. The problem, though, is that we oftentimes think that we live in Mediocristan, but we don't. We live in Extremistan. And the difference is you cannot predict the Lehman Brothers, COVID, Russian wheat embargo. You cannot predict any of this. It's impossible to predict it. What matters is your exposure to it and how you're going to manage your portfolio of tools available to you, and have a plan for how you're going to take care of yourself if and when these things hit. Okay, so we live in Extremistan. We cannot predict the next shock that's going to hit us, but it will hit us. Perhaps right now, maybe it'll be worse into the future. But when we think about that going into the future, we have to think about time and the role of time. And so suppose you're worried about a 5% risk event, which is 1 in 20. Perhaps that's just low revenue. That could be low yield and a low price. The probability of that happening that in 2025, 5%, exactly what it says. But that's not the entire idea, is when it can happen over time. What's the role of time? So if you bump that out to 4 years, it's 18%. Happening at least once in the next 10 years, I say I wrote 20 there, is 40% chance. And if you want to go out for 30 years, so you're gonna plant crops for the next 30 years, there's a 78% chance that you're going to experience a low yield event at least once through your farming career of 30 years. And that is where we have to differentiate. Are we going to think about the short term, which is just happening in 2025? Or are we going to think about a strategy over the long term where we're trying to manage a portfolio that we can't see when things are going to happen to us, but we know with time there's a good chance that we are going to experience a low yield or low revenue event. But in any given year, yeah, the probability is really low. But when we start repeating over time, those probabilities get substantially larger. So it's our perspective of how we want to view time. So let's move to corn futures prices. This is the price path of just 1 year in the recent past, and you can see how much that thing varied from March 1st to October. The x-axis there is the number of trading days after March 1, and we use March 1 because that's when the crop insurance projected price is determined. And then that's effectively almost think of it like percent changes on the y-axis. So prices dropped down and then eventually came back up in this 1 year. And so this is just 1 year, and we can watch any particular year we want. But again, we are facing uncertainty about what's going to happen this upcoming year. And that means then that we can look back across multiple years to start observing that uncertainty. So here in this one, we now have 3 years of prices, and we can see how they all moved differently. And then we can even add more years to that and see how they even moved more. And the idea here is you keep building in more and more prices, you can start seeing that variability starts growing when you get over to the fall, which is over here on the right-hand side, where you have that big red line that says risk. That is the price risk that we face, is from spring to fall, prices are going to evolve, and we don't know whether they're going to go up or down in any given year. But what we do know is when you take the average of a whole bunch of historical prices, we get this thing that shows us the seasonality. And so taking the average of a whole bunch of years, we get this concept here of seasonality that shows that in the spring prices are typically higher than in the fall. But you only get that when you hedge consistently year over year in the spring. And so there's going to be some years in the spring where you're going to hedge and prices are going to go up into the fall. And then there's going to be other years you're going to hedge and prices are going to go down. And you take the average of all of that, and this is what you'd end up with. You would end up with prices higher selling in the spring than in the fall. Okay, so that's the concept of seasonality. But to see that, you have to repeat and you got to get multiple years in there, perhaps even up to that 30-year time frame that we talked about earlier of the roll of time. So the only way you get to see seasonality is by repeating year in, year out of what's going on. Okay? But let's take a look here at some historical prices just between December futures in February, and then the same harvest price. So the February one is the projected price, and then the October price is the fall price for crop insurance. So here I'm going to show it a little differently, and I want to start down here at the bottom. In 2024, we started off at 466, and we ended up at 416, so it was a little higher in the spring. In 2023, we started off at 591 and ended up at 488. And then the 3 years before that, potentially even the fourth, particularly the three, prices started off in the spring and went higher into the fall. And those 3 years of 2020, 2021, and 2022 caused a lot of anxiety towards the concept of pre-harvest marketing. And that caused a lot of people in 2023 and 2024 to ratchet back the idea of forward contracting. And that's the short-sighted view, is you can't let 1 or 2 years outcomes drive your future decision making when it comes to something such as futures markets, where there's a whole lot of variability in them, and you're literally letting just a couple of observations drive your entire decision making when you need to take a little more into account in this. And perhaps a good analogy to this is you go out and you buy a new piece of equipment, let's say a tractor. It shows up at your place, and you go out to start it and it doesn't run. Do you immediately give up on the tractor, or do you get it fixed? In the tractor world, you call up the dealer because it's under warranty. Suppose it's a new tractor, and they come out and fix it. In the grain marketing world, that essentially comes down to knowledge, having a deeper thought process about how are you going to handle uncertainties in distributions. How are you going to handle that? And so if you took 2022 as your example, as the previous year, prices went up by 16%. Some people are going to say, I'm not going to forward contract, but you literally got to think deeper about it, because then it came back and reverted the other way, where forward contracting was definitely very helpful the last couple of years. But that's the backward-looking view. Let's take the forward-looking view, and this is the price distribution of December corn futures at expiration. So this has the projected price in for crop insurance and the volatility factor in that. And the idea here is this red line is just a whole bunch of dots of possible prices. And I think there's like 30,000 in there, and you put in a whole bunch so you can get a continuum from the low end to the high end. But you only get one for 2025. You get one dot on this thing. And I have no idea where that price will be. But the essence of that is you want to understand that there is a chance, 10% chance here. You go up to 10%, 0.1, go over till you hit the red line, and then drop down to the price. That there's a 10% chance that prices could end up below about 360, let's call it, come fall. And that's a pretty low chance. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. But that gives you the idea of where prices could be. Will we observe that? Unlikely. But we need to be cognizant that that does exist. Okay, there's a combination of something out there that could drive those prices to be lower than $4, which in the sense of $4 would be about a 22% chance of being below $4. So we face a lot of uncertainty there, or risk around that price distribution. But again, we only get to see one for this upcoming year. So this is what you're managing, but you're not going to experience everything. You're just going to get one. So that's it for corn seasonality. Let's move over to soybeans. I'm going to skip the price distributions and get you right to the long run seasonality in soybeans. And it is substantially different than corn. So in the soybean world, the mid-May to mid-July gives you your best chance um, of a seasonality, but it's not very strong compared to corn, because in the fall over here, prices don't drop down drastically below where they were in the spring. Okay, so the soybean seasonality is a lot smaller, but still exists. Okay, but the strategy there, because the historical seasonality is in different form or different place, you would follow a different strategy than you would do for corn. So, where does that leave us? What is the most successful risk management strategy? Well, that is, of course, those that survive time. And time is not last year. And I hope I've motivated that well today. In we don't we don't just look at last year to see how our hedging did. If we're following that a couple years ago, we say hedging is bad, and in the last couple of years we say hedging is good. We got to get out of that and think deeper about what are we trying to accomplish when we're forward contracting. Are we trying to follow a hedging strategy? And the only way you'll see that is through repeated chances, and add all that up at the end. So uh, here's a big picture takeaway. Engage in hedging knowing that the price path is unknown. Some years you're going to end up with a price higher. Some years end up with a price lower. Okay. Use crop insurance, of course, to your advantage. And of course, with RP, you do have some price protection in that. Use seasonality to your advantage. But in order to do that, you have to think about the long run. All right. But devote only a percent of your production to this strategy. And then you evaluate the outcomes way into the future. Perhaps that's when you're done farming, your last year. Add all those things up and see how it did. We're interacting here between what the historical market has shown us on seasonality, but we're also going into the future where we don't know what's going to happen. Focus on building an average farm price, right? You're not win or losing on either a certain strategy every year, which causes emotion. Just focus on building an average farm price. Devote part of your exposure to pre-harvest marketing. Have some percent sell there. Sell something at harvest as well, and sell something into the storage if you have storage. And then take that average farm price, knowing that you're trying to build an average farm price that maintains farm profitability and keeps your banker your friend. And with that, Jessica, that is what I have.
All right. So again, if you have any questions, we will take those from the chat. This is a great opportunity to think a little bit more deeply about these topics. So again, if you would like us to go back to a slide or dig a little deeper into a topic, now is your opportunity. So again, if you have those questions, go ahead and stick them in the chat.
We need some questions too.
So Corey, you did mention there's different strategies as we look between corn and soybeans in the seasonality. Will you dig a little bit deeper into that discussion?
Yeah, you bet. Let me get back to this thing. Share screen. There you go. That guy. There. Move you guys off to the side here. There we are. Yeah, so the idea then would be for corn seasonality, the of course the most opportune times would be sometime in April, sometime in June, knowing then that historically on average, they dropped way off going into harvest. But really anything in that springtime is when it seasonality is your friend. But of course, this is the toughest time to forward contract anything because you also face a whole bunch of uncertainty because you know nothing about the crop size, what's going on anywhere else. You are literally focusing on just following historical seasonality in this. And you have to do that in a time when you don't know a lot about what the market's going to give you. And then the underlying idea there is that you're doing it because the market might actually be a little bit high because they also don't know. And so you want to take advantage of that. And then over on the soybean side, that is a little bit different, with prices not moving as drastically down from spring to fall, knowing there's a lot more variability in there, and the gains to it are also a lot smaller on soybean seasonality.
So we do have some questions coming in through the chat. There was a price probability chart for corn. Do you by chance have one for soybeans?
I apologize. Here's to why I didn't. Uh, I don't have it because that computer program is not on my laptop. They charge me for another subscription for that, and I only grabbed the corn one. But we could talk about the soybean one as well, knowing that there is going to be something, way down that line down there on the low price of soybeans that you're effectively um, subject to, but you don't know it. So think of some really horrible soybean price, put it in the $6 range, let's say, and there's a chance it could end up down there. I'm unable to show it to you today, but knowing that you're forward contracting to put at least a percent of your portfolio, your average farm price, um, not being exposed to that low price come fall.
Okay, there's another really interesting question in the chat. Earlier this year, I did an AI search for the best day to sell corn. The reply was June 16th. Later, a marketer told me that date was based on seasonality. What do you think?
Oh, undoubtedly. So this is um, the June time frame here is where it's at. So okay, this and I can't see the questions for some reason. Um, but I love the idea that you asked AI and you can get a quick answer. I was recently experimenting with it as well, and a little bit of an aside here that if I wanted to look up how to make chili using a Google search, it will send me to a bunch of websites with a bunch of ads, and maybe I can do to the recipe. If I want to look up how to make chili with AI, I just type that thing in and it's going to give me an answer immediately. There's no ads in it, and it's going to give me some advice if I want to spice it up or do something kind of different to it, maybe put some fish oil or something goofy in it, and it will do this or that. Things that I didn't even know I could ask, but it's showing me things. Um, I love that. You got an answer really quick. And I would caution you on not trying to pick a precise day, but understand that there's probably a range around that where according to the seasonality chart here, really for me, anything in that June timeframe is fantastic. You're not trying to pick the high. You're trying to create an average farm price. So just do well with it, and know that there's variability around it, and that's the life that the environment that we live in.
So building off what one of the other participants asked, um, do you have seasonality charts for wheat? Why or why not, Cory?
Oh, I do. Sorry, I did not put the wheat charts in. Um, there is seasonality in winter wheat. Um, Winter wheat has a lot more time with it, obviously, because from that fall price in the fall when it's planted to go all the way through June. And I would be happy to share those with you. I don't think I could snag them. If I stop my share, I can actually go grab them and pull those things up because I know exactly where they're at.
So while Cory's doing that, again, I would encourage you that if you have questions to go ahead and fill them in that chat box. We encourage those questions. It's much more fun to deal with questions than it is for Cory and I to bounce back and forth. So any questions you have, we're happy to take them.
All right, I think I'm getting it open here. Got it. All right. We'll do some hard red winter wheat here. Share. All right, so here is the hard red winter wheat seasonality. And let's walk through that thing. This one's presented a little bit differently than the other ones, but you get the idea of it. So we start off on September 15th, and and the blue line here is the seasonality line, and then these other two lines around it are confidence intervals, which I'll discuss here towards the harvest time. So in the seasonality, long run seasonality, that would be sometime towards the beginning of May and sometime towards the beginning of June um, to hit that thing. And sorry, those are not the right days because that is the June is at harvest. So what would be we can solve this thing. Oh, I went to the spring wheat. Sorry, I want to be on winter wheat. Here we go. So the seasonality on winter wheat is 0.1 is the middle of February, and then 0.2, which actually is a little higher, is the beginning of May. So somewhere around here, and then prices typically drop off at harvest. But note in this that this these confidence intervals here suggest that it's really no different from zero or from not changing because it's really wild what can happen in wheat. It can go way down or it can go way up by harvest. So it's not as strong as corn. Corn is bar none the strongest seasonality there is, and wheat and soybeans are much more much less in the strength, but still something exists, and it can still help the bottom line, but proceed caution with it compared to the corn side.
Can you discuss why there is stronger seasonality in corn than wheat or soybeans?
Yeah, so the big picture on that is we're the main player in corn, and we're not in soybeans and wheat. Soybeans, of course, we got South America, and wheat is can be grown in any nook and cranny around the world. So it's just not as strong compared to corn, where we're the big player
All
in a
right.
small area.
I'm going to offer one more time while the recording is on. Are there any questions?